you going there, peeps? Phil here from MTG Kiwi Philosophy here again, bringing you yet another deck tech. This time we're going to go with a Izzet Historic Artifact deck, just in time a week before we get the pre-release of Guilds of Ravnica. Here we go, let's kick it off with our build arounds, and they are 4 copies of Jhoira Weatherlight Captain, 4 copies of Sai Master Thopterist. Okay, so these two beautiful Legend cards are going to work side by side in an artifact deck and in a historic deck, of course. So the fantastic thing about Jhoira is she's a 4-drop and she's 3/3, and whenever we play a historic card, we get to draw a card. So we're going to run a lot of historic cards, but majority of them are going to be artifacts, but we do have other cards in our deck that are going to be historic. And of course, Sai Master Thopterist gets a 1/1 Thopter every time we cast an artifact spell. So that's going to be really fantastic for us. So we're going to have to figure out a way that we can protect these creatures if there are build arounds. And of course, the only way to do that is by the cheapest means possible, and that is 4 copies of Dive Down. Now, Dive Down is fantastic. It's a 1-drop instant speed. Target creature gets +3 in defense and hexproof till the end of the turn. So it's really good if we're really low on mana. We just save that 1 blue mana just to save our butt. So we make sure we've got our draw mechanisms and our go wide. Now, Sai's fantastic, you know, because he is a 3-drop and he's 1/4, so he's going to be really hard to remove early game. He's going to clog up the board a bit, and that's going to be fantastic for us. He also has a secondary ability where we can sacrifice 2 artifacts to be able to draw a card. So we've got 2 draw mechanisms, one coming from Jhoira, the other one from Sai, and that's going to be fantastic. And what's another good way to be able to get draws from artifacts? Well, why, of course, 2 copies of Tezzeret, Artifact Master. Tezzeret is a 5-drop, 5 loyalty planeswalker. +1, we get to create a colorless artifact Thopter with flying. 0, we get to draw a card, but if we control 3 or more artifacts, we get to draw 2 cards instead. So that's really fantastic for us. And of course, the ulti is we get an emblem at the beginning of our end step. We can search our library for a permanent card and put it onto the battlefield and shuffle our library. So this is going to be really good for us. So with all of this card draw and with Tezzeret, with additional card draw, we've got our card draw down with permanence, so it's just protecting them that's going to be the key in this game. Alright, well, let's move on to our next card before we talk about our artifacts in this deck, and that is 2 copies of Tetsuko Umezawa Fugitive. This 2-drop 1/3 human rogue who's legendary, historic, that's right, card draw, is fantastic. Creatures with the power and toughness of 1 can't be blocked. So it's going to be fantastic. All of those Thopters we're going to be creating with Tezzeret and also with Sai means they're going to be unblockable, and we're just going to be able to keep on marching in. It's going to be really good. It's really aggressive, but also really helps us get wide and get to that magic number 3 as well, so we can get those card draws happening a lot faster as well. Okay, well, let's move on to the first of our artifacts, and we're going to go with 2 copies of Treasure Map. Now, Treasure Map's fantastic. It's a 2-drop artifact. We can pay 1 and scry, put a landmark counter on Treasure Map, and then if we get 3 of them, we get to flip it. And then when we flip it, it turns into the Treasure Cove. Now, it's pretty awesome. We can add 1 colorless mana to it, or we can tap the Treasure Cove and draw a card. And of course, when we do flip the Treasure Map, we get 3 treasures, so that's going to be fantastic for us as well. It's also going to give us 3 artifacts. That's going to help us get the extra card draw with Tezzeret. And of course, when the treasure map enters the battlefield, we get the triggers from Sai and we create a Thopter. So that's really good as well. But it's more card draw. You know, there's card draw everywhere in this deck, and it's really fantastic. Alright, well, let's move on to the next artifact, and that is 2 copies of Sorcerous Spyglass. Now, this 2-drop artifact is really fantastic. We get to look at our opponent's hand, and we can choose a card name from their hand or from their deck, and activated abilities of the source of the chosen name can't be activated unless they are mana abilities. So it's really good against planeswalkers. So the Sorcerous Spyglass is fantastic. It's going to be able to shut down our opponent's decks. It's going to be really helpful for us. It also triggers Sai and also gets us to the magic number so we can get extra card draw off Tezzeret. It's really good. It's also historic, so we also get a card draw from Jhoira, and the same goes for any artifact we play, really. Let's move on to our next card, and this one is an artifact creature, and that is 2 copies of Suspicious Bookcase. It's a 0/4 wall for 2, but we can also pay 3, and target creature can't be blocked this turn. So it's going to give us evasion. It's really fantastic. It triggers Jhoira, we get to draw a card. It triggers Sai, we get the Thopter, and of course, it's going to help us get to the magic number with Tezzeret. La la la. See the synergies happening. It's really, really good. It's not too bad. It's 0/4 for 2 is really good. It's going to help clog up the board, and that's going to be really helpful for us with our defense as well. So far we've got some really nice low-end creatures like Tetsuko, Suspicious Bookcase, and also Sai that are going to have a high defensive end for a low cost, and it's going to help us just stabilize our board. All right, well, let's move on to the next card, and that is 2 copies of Chaos Wand. Now the Chaos Wand is a fantastic artifact. It's 3-drop, but we can pay for and tap it, and we get to look at the top card of we get to exile the top card of our opponent's library until they exile an instant or sorcery card, and we can cast that card for free. So it's helpful when our removal. We don't need to worry about too much removal in this deck. If we can get a Chaos Wand out, it means that we can just start cycling through our opponent's cards, removing all of their instants and sorceries out of their deck. Also helps us keeping our creatures on the board, so it means that we're taking their removal cards away from them as well, which is fantastic. Secondly, it also triggers Jhoira, it triggers Sai, and also, once again, magical numbers for Tezzeret, and we're back in the game. Alright, well, let's move on to our 4-drops now, and we're going to go with 4 copies of this one, and that's Traxos, Scourge of Kroog. Now, Traxos is a 4-drop, 7/7 trample artifact creature. So it enters the battlefield, it triggers Jhoira, it triggers Sai, and of course, it also helps us get to the magic number. And it's really fantastic. We've got so many artifacts in this deck. We're going to have no trouble untapping Traxos. The only downside is we haven't got anything we can flash into block untap Traxos at instant speed, but we do have the attacking advantages, which is fantastic for us, and that means this is a target our opponent really wants to remove, because it is definitely going to be difficult for them going forward for us. It's also a great defender once we've got it untapped, because we can just keep flying over with the Thopters, and that's going to get in that early damage and also the late damage as well. Alright, well, let's move on to our next 4-drop, and that is, of course, 2 copies of the Weatherlight. Now, the Weatherlight's also historic, and it's an artifact. It's a 4-drop. It's also a 4/5 at crew 3, and whenever the Weatherlight deals combat damage to a player, we look at the top 5 cards of our library. We can reveal a historic card from amongst them, put it into our hand, and put the rest in the bottom of our library in a random order. So it's really good for digging through our deck, but the fantastic thing is we get to get the triggers from Jhoira, get the draw from her, we get to get ourselves a Thopter from the Weatherlight, plus, you know, being able to crew it for 3, get the magic number for Tezzeret. It's really, really fun. I really like playing the Weatherlight. I think it's fantastic that they brought it back for the set, and I can't wait to see how it's going to be played in the future with other artifact decks. Anyway, let's move on to our next card, and that is 4 copies of Zahid, Djinn of the Lamp. Now, it's obviously going to be a 4-drop because of the ability, but its casting cost is 6. It is a 5/6 flyer, but for its ability, we may pay 4 and tap an artifact, and then of course we can get it into play. So Zahid's really fantastic. It's historic. It's going to get the card draw from Jhoira, and of course it's going to be really, really good for us. It has evasion, it's 5/4 flying, it's hard to remove, it has 6 in defense, and of course it's a board presence thing that we can also give unblockable with the Suspicious Bookcase. And it's the same thing for Traxos. We can use Traxos, Suspicious Bookcase, swing in for 7, and, you know, opponents are in a whole heap of trouble. But, yeah, that's pretty good. And, of course, we're going to move on to our last card, and that is 2 copies of Meteor Golem. Now, Meteor Golem is a little bit on the heavy side for its casting cost, but having a 3/3 artifact creature that destroys a non-land permanent, when it comes into play is really fantastic. You know, it's going to trigger Jhoira, we get to draw a card, we get a Thopter, We also get to the magic number with Tez, and things are really looking dire for our opponent. The fantastic thing about Meteor Golem is it can take out anything. So if they've got something like an Ixalan's Binding, we can just destroy that, and our thing is going to come back into play, and then that's probably going to trigger again. And so late game's really good for us. We're just going to draw, and then we're just going to start to overrun our opponents. Now, you're probably wondering in the deck why there's lots of 2-ofs. Now, the reason I've got a lot of 2-ofs is because of Ixalan's Binding. Because you find if you have a deck that's built around synergies, that your opponent can just play a couple Ixalan's Binding and take, your combinations out. So the idea is that we don't have 4s of a lot of things because we don't want our opponents to be able to remove the synergy or the combos from the deck. We want to be able to have a win condition, and that's really important for every deck. Well, it's time to move on to our land and then our sideboard, and we're going to keep the lands real simple this time. We're going to go with 4 Sulfur Falls, 10 Islands, and 10 Mountains. We don't want to keep it complicated, we just want to keep it simple because card draw is going to be quite prominent in this deck. Alright, well, let's move on to our sideboard, and our sideboard is, for me, it's a lot of really good cards with synergy with the deck. But if you look at the sideboard as a whole, it's probably a little janky, but the idea is it's just there for a bit of fun, so you can chop and change and try a few different things with this deck. And we're going to go with the first of those cards, and that is 2 copies of Thaumatic Compass. Now the Compass is again a 2-drop artifact that will trigger Jhoira to draw a card, trigger Sight, and also help out with Tezzeret. But it has pay 3, we search our library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it onto our hand shuffle our library. At the beginning of our end step, if we control 7 or more lands, we can then flip the compass, and we get Spires of Orazca. Now, the Spires of Orazca is fantastic. It's going to help us defensively, so we can add 1 colorless mana to our pool, or we can tap it and untap target attacking creature an opponent controls and remove it from combat, which is really good, because we can do this at instant speed, and it means that we can also wait until they've tried to buff it or just about anything, and it's really going to be helpful for our opponent. They're going to know that this is going to get played at some point. Of course, they'll get to react, but nonetheless, if they get a little bit lazy on the play, then we can really shut them down. Alright, well, let's move on to the next card, and that is 2 copies of Squee the Immortal. Now, Squee's fantastic, being a 3-drop 2/1, but also being legendary. It's historic, which triggers Jhoira, and also will help us stay stable on the board. Now, the great thing about Squee is that he's really hard to remove because he just keeps coming back as long as we can afford the mana. We obviously can't do it during our opponent's turn, which is not the best, but being able to do it at the end of our turn is fantastic. It's also going to help us recasting it on a regular basis with Jhoira, means that we're going to constantly get triggers to draw cards, and it's an all-around just value card, really. And another value card that's going to really help us is 2 copies of Jaya's Immolating Inferno. Now, the Inferno is double red and X. So a legendary sorcerer, so we do have to have a legendary creature or a planeswalker to be able to cast it, but being able to deal X damage to each of up to 3 targets is fantastic. And if we've got Squee on play, it's a guaranteed cast, because we can basically, even if he's in the graveyard, return him, and then play Jaya's Immolating Inferno, and we'll do some serious damage there. And of course, being legendary, it is going to trigger Jhoira, and we're going to get some card draw for that, and that's going to be really nice for us. Alright, well, let's move on to the next card, and that is 2 copies of Storm the Vault. Now, Storm the Vault is a 4-drop legendary enchantment, so it's going to trigger, of course, Jhoira. We're going to get a card draw from that, and the ability is when 1 or more creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you get to create a treasure token, which is really fantastic because it goes towards Tezzeret, and it also helps us second it to the treasure cove as well. And of course, at the beginning of your end step, if you control 5 or more artifacts, you get to transform it. So here's the funny thing, and this is what I really like about it, is that you get to flip it, and then it becomes the Vault of Catalacan, and you can add 1 mana of any color, or you can tap it and add 1 blue mana for each artifact you control. So there's a lot of mana sink there, which is really awesome. So if we're going to have this mana sink, we're going to need something to sink the mana into. So let's talk about moving on to the next card, And, Jaya's Immolating Inferno is definitely one of them, but I definitely think we need this card in the sideboard, and that is 2 copies of BaneFire. Now, the reason you want BaneFire in there is for those blue clowns out there who like to use counter spells and just be complete dicks on the game. But nonetheless, we're our friends and we let them do it. So, it's our fault. But yeah, having a burn spell that can't be countered, it is great for us. Alright, well, let's move on to the next card, and that is 2 copies of Antiquities War. Yes, yet another historic spell that's going to trigger Jhoira, and of course, it's really going to help us because, of course, the artifacts that we get to search with our Antiquities Wars is going to really help us develop our board more and get us more card draw, and of course get us more Thopters, which is really fantastic. And when we get the ulti from the Antiquities War, it's going to be even better because all those artifacts we have in play become 5/5 creatures until the end of the turn, and we just get to swing in. So you think about all the treasure tokens, all the Thopters with flying, mate, it's going to be some serious damage, and it's a really lovely finisher as well. And of course, the next card we're going to have in our deck, and that is 2 copies of Helm of the Host. Now, Helm of the Host is a vicious equipment card. It's a 4-drop and 5 to equip. Yes, so a little bit costly, but the ability to be able to create another copy of a target creature, even if it's legendary, means that we can target Sai or even Jhoira and get double card draws, or we can get double Thopters. I think Thopters for sure is definitely the way to go, and then we just go wide on size, and then every artifact we cast, we're creating 2 Thopters, then 3 Thopters, and so on, and it's just going to get really hard for our opponents. And of course that's usually a concede moment because the opponents aren't going to have very many things that are going to be able to deal with that. Sure, they might have a naturalize, or they could use the Ixalan's binding, but we'll figure out a way to get around that. And nonetheless, alright, well, let's move on to the last card in our sideboard, and I wouldn't blame you if you'd put more of this in your deck or even just in your sideboard. I mean, it's a really great card, and it's great for the mana sink because let's face it, we really need mana sink in a deck where we're going to have a lot of mana. Okay, and that is, of course, 1 copy of the Golden Guardian. Yeah, this 4-drop, 4/4 defender, it's really good. It's going to trigger Jhoira being historic. It triggers the Thopterist, and of course, the ability to be able to pay 2 and fight one of our own creatures, and if it dies, we get to transform it into the Golden Forge Garrison, is really awesome because we can then add 2 mana of any color to our pool, which is fantastic for any of our fireballs, and we get to pay 4, tap it, and we can create a colorless Golem artifact creature, which is also awesome. So, I think that this is a win-win situation, and having all that mana that we could sink into this, that's end of opponent's turn and also our turn if we need be, it means that we've really got some more depth in our creature size, and that's fantastic. Well, that's it here from MTG Kiwi Philosophy. I'm Phil. I really hoped you liked this Izzet Historic Artifact deck. It's been really fun playing it, and I think that you'll enjoy it too. Alright, so don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and share. Get us out there, and I guess I'll see you on the flip side. Ciao.